Hi, welcome to Conflict Story, where we bring you the best and most fascinating stories just for you. Let's dive right into one of those stories. It begins like this.
2 years ago, my life took an unexpected turn when I started an innocent project, building a workshop in my backyard. I'd been living in my modest ranch-style home for 5 years by then, putting time and effort into renovations to make it my dream home. New roof, fresh paint, updated kitchen. I was proud of how far the house had come, but I had no idea that this personal project would ignite a battle with my next-door neighbors that would consume the next year of my life. The Johnsons, Frank and Linda, were in their early 60s and had lived in the neighborhood for over 3 decades. On the surface, they seemed friendly enough. We'd exchange polite greetings and small talk, but I soon learned they were obsessive about maintaining the charm of the neighborhood, which was a relic of its 1960s suburban roots. While I appreciated a well-kept neighborhood, the Johnsons took it to another level. Their vigilance extended to policing grass heights, garbage can schedules, and paint colors. When I painted my house beige, a neutral modern color, Frank wasted no time in sharing his disapproval, claiming the previous color better fit the character of the neighborhood. I dismissed it as harmless grumbling, but it was a precursor of things to come. My dream workshop was meant to be a haven for my woodworking hobby. With my garage barely big enough for my car, I decided to build a simple 20x30 FT structure in my backyard. I meticulously followed all legal protocols, zoning laws, permits, architectural plans. Everything was by the book, but I made a crucial mistake. I didn't inform my neighbors. I didn't think I needed to. It was my property after all. Why would anyone care? The day construction began, I got a frantic call from Mike, my contractor friend. "Some guy named Frank is here," he said. "He's claiming we can't build." When I arrived home, I found Frank standing in my driveway, arms crossed, declaring my workshop violated the standards of the neighborhood. He insisted there was an unofficial covenant that prohibited such structures. I pointed out that no homeowner association existed, and all my permits were in order. He was unmoved, threatening to call the city to stop construction. Frank's interference didn't end there. The following morning, he and Linda emerged with homemade signs protesting the workshop, accusing me of industrializing the neighborhood. Linda's shrill warnings about factories and warehouses popping up were absurd. Despite their protests, Mike's crew resumed work, but Frank escalated by involving city inspectors, the Historical Society, and even the police with baseless complaints. The harassment was relentless. One day I caught Frank measuring the distance between the workshop and the property line, claiming it was too close. It wasn't. Another time, they tried to organize a neighborhood petition against me. Their antics were so extreme that many neighbors, initially indifferent, began siding with me out of sheer frustration. I installed security cameras, documented every interaction, and sought advice from my lawyer. Armed with evidence of trespassing and harassment, I filed for a restraining order. In court, my video and audio evidence spoke louder than Frank's hollow claims of protecting the neighborhood. The judge granted the order, barring them from interfering further. Though the construction progressed smoothly after that, Frank and Linda's attempts to sway public opinion backfired. Their incessant campaigning and negativity alienated them from the community. Meanwhile, I completed my workshop and began using it to teach woodworking to neighbors and help with small projects, fostering goodwill and turning the space into a community asset. One day, a neighbor mentioned Frank and Linda were planning to move. True enough, I watched as moving trucks arrived and the Johnsons packed up and left. Before leaving, Frank approached me, his voice tinged with bitterness. "I hope you're happy. You've ruined this neighborhood." I tried to explain I never wanted this conflict, but he waved me off and walked away. Their departure marked a new chapter for the neighborhood. Without their overbearing presence, the community flourished. We held a block party to celebrate new beginnings. My workshop became a neighborhood hub, a place where people gathered, learned, and connected. Life was better than I'd imagined. I later heard Frank and Linda had moved to a gated community in Florida with strict homeowner association rules. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had sought control so fiercely here, only to leave for a place where their lives were dictated by rules. As for me, I found something far more valuable than a workshop: a sense of community, resilience, and the realization that standing up for myself could lead to unexpected rewards. And all it took was a little perseverance and a lot of patience to turn my dream into a reality. The restraining order granted by the court brought me some peace, but it didn't mark the end of the Johnsons' crusade. While they could no longer harass me directly or trespass on my property, they channeled their energy into subtler tactics. Letters to the editor of the local newspaper began appearing, warning of the degradation of our once charming neighborhood. Anonymous flyers started showing up in mailboxes, claiming that my workshop would lead to a surge in noise, traffic, and declining property values. Though unsigned, it wasn't hard to guess the source. Despite their efforts, the neighborhood's mood had shifted. Tom, my neighbor from across the street, had been instrumental in rallying support for me. He organized casual gatherings, ensuring that misinformation was countered with facts. People who had initially been wary of the workshop now saw it as an opportunity for community engagement. Some even stopped by to offer encouragement or chat about their own DIY projects. Construction progressed steadily. Mike and his crew worked diligently, and every day brought visible progress. The frame went up, followed by the roof and siding. Seeing the structure take shape filled me with pride and excitement, but it also seemed to intensify Frank and Linda's bitterness. Though they avoided direct contact, I could feel their glare from behind their curtains whenever I stepped outside. Occasionally, I'd catch them pacing their yard, whispering animatedly, likely strategizing their next move. One evening, as I was locking up the workshop for the night, a car pulled up in front of my house. A man in a crisp suit stepped out and introduced himself as Richard Harris, a representative from a law firm retained by the Johnsons. He handed me a letter, his tone polite but firm. "This is a formal notice challenging the legality of your construction," he said. "My clients believe there are zoning violations that must be addressed." I unfolded the letter, scanning its contents. It was filled with technical jargon and vague accusations about setbacks, height restrictions, and other supposed infractions. I knew it was nonsense. I'd done everything by the book. Still, the thought of a legal battle loomed large in my mind. I thanked Harris, closed the door, and immediately called my lawyer. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings and paperwork. My lawyer reassured me that the claims were baseless and filed a counter motion to dismiss. Meanwhile, the workshop neared completion. I tried to focus on the positive: the smell of fresh-cut wood, the gleaming windows that let in streams of sunlight. But the weight of the ongoing conflict was hard to shake. Then came the neighborhood meeting. Frank and Linda had called for a gathering at the community center to discuss preserving the character of the neighborhood. Word spread quickly, and Tom urged me to attend. "You need to hear what they're saying," he said, "and people need to hear your side too." When I arrived, the room was packed. Frank stood at the front, his face flushed with self-righteous determination. A large poster board displayed grainy photos of my workshop mid-construction, along with exaggerated captions like "eyesore in progress" and "property values under threat." Linda was at his side, nodding vigorously as he launched into a speech about the slippery slope my workshop represented. "If we allow this, what's next?" he asked the crowd. "Warehouses? Parking lots? We must take a stand now, or we risk losing everything that makes this neighborhood special." I felt a surge of anger but kept my composure. When Frank opened the floor for questions, I raised my hand and stood. The room quieted as I addressed the crowd. "I'm not here to fight," I began. "I'm here to share the facts. My workshop is fully permitted and complies with every zoning regulation. It's not a factory or a warehouse. It's a place where I can pursue my woodworking hobby." I gestured toward Tom, who had helped distribute copies of my permits earlier. "You've all seen the paperwork. This isn't about breaking rules or disrupting the neighborhood. It's about following my passion and sharing it with others." Some people nodded, and I could sense a shift in the room. Frank tried to interrupt, but a woman in the back stood up. "I've lived here for 25 years, she said, her voice steady, "and I'm tired of the negativity. Let the man build his workshop. We should be supporting each other, not tearing each other down." Applause broke out and Frank's face darkened. He sputtered a response, but it was clear he'd lost the room. The meeting ended with a motion to "live and let live," as one neighbor put it. For the first time, I felt the tide turning in my favor. When I returned home that night, I stood in my nearly finished workshop, running my hands over the smooth wood of the workbench. It wasn't just a building anymore. It was a symbol of perseverance, of standing up for what mattered. But I knew Frank and Linda weren't done yet. This battle wasn't just about a workshop. It was about control, and they weren't going to relinquish it easily. As I closed the door, I resolved to see this through, no matter what came next. Little did I know, the Johnsons still had one last trick up their sleeves, and it would push this conflict to its most dramatic point yet. The neighborhood meeting marked a turning point, but Frank and Linda were far from giving up. Their campaign against my workshop entered its final, desperate phase, and the next few weeks became a whirlwind of escalating conflict that I could never have predicted. It started subtly. Flyers began appearing again, but this time they claimed my workshop was a health hazard. They warned of increased dust particles polluting the air and the potential for toxic fumes from hazardous chemicals. It was absurd. My woodworking projects used basic materials and I always followed safety protocols. But these allegations planted seeds of doubt in some neighbors' minds, and I found myself defending my integrity yet again. Then came the vandalism. One morning, I stepped outside to find my workshop's walls spray-painted with the words "Not Wanted" in bold red letters. My stomach churned as I surveyed the damage. Security cameras had captured the act, and though the culprits wore hoodies and masks, the footage showed them sneaking back toward the Johnsons' house afterward. I filed a police report, hoping this would finally put an end to their antics. But Frank and Linda's most dramatic move came a week later. Early one morning, I was jolted awake by the sound of shouting and heavy machinery. I rushed outside to find a tow truck idling near my driveway, hooked to one of the construction vehicles parked there. Frank stood nearby, gesturing animatedly and arguing with the tow truck driver. "You can't just tow this," I shouted, running up to the scene. Frank smirked. "I've called the city. That vehicle's blocking public access and needs to be removed." "It's parked on my property," I countered, waving toward the driveway, "and I have every right to have it here." The tow truck driver, looking uncomfortable, hesitated. "Look, man, I'm just doing what I was called to do. If this is private property, I'll leave." "It is private property," I insisted, showing him the property line and explaining the situation. After a tense standoff, the driver unhooked the truck and drove off, muttering about wasted time. Frank, however, wasn't done. "This is far from over," he hissed before retreating to his house. I knew he meant it, and I braced myself for the next round. In the days that followed, the tension reached its peak. Frank and Linda filed a formal complaint with the city council, alleging my workshop violated environmental regulations. They called for an emergency hearing, which I was required to attend. The hearing was set for the following week, giving me little time to prepare. The night before the hearing, I stayed up late gathering every piece of documentation I could find. Permits, zoning approvals, environmental clearances, even testimonials from neighbors supporting my project. Tom, ever the supportive friend, volunteered to come with me as a witness. The hearing was tense. Frank and Linda arrived with folders of their own, filled with exaggerated claims and dramatic rhetoric. They spoke at length about the damage my workshop was causing, painting a picture of a neighborhood in decline. When it was my turn to speak, I laid out the facts calmly and clearly, presenting my evidence and refuting their baseless accusations point by point. Tom stood up next and delivered a heartfelt statement about how my workshop had become a positive addition to the neighborhood. "This isn't just a building," he said. "It's a space that's brought people together. We've seen it firsthand." The council deliberated for what felt like an eternity before delivering their decision. They dismissed Frank and Linda's complaint, stating there was no evidence of any violations. As the council chair announced the ruling, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It was over, at least officially. When we stepped out of the council chamber, Frank's face was a mix of anger and defeat. He glared at me but said nothing, storming off with Linda trailing behind. Tom clapped me on the shoulder. "You did it," he said. "They've got nothing left." For the first time in months, I felt a weight lift. I could finally focus on finishing the workshop and moving forward. The next few weeks were blissfully uneventful. The workshop was completed and I threw a small open house for the neighbors. People came by to see the space, and it felt like a victory. Not just for me, but for the community that had supported me. As for Frank and Linda, their defeat seemed to take a toll. They became reclusive, their curtains drawn at all hours. Rumors swirled that they were planning to sell their house. Part of me felt a pang of guilt. After all, they'd lived here for decades. But I couldn't ignore the relief I felt at the thought of finally having peace. Then one morning, a for sale sign appeared on their lawn. Tom texted me a photo with a simple caption, "Victory." I chuckled, shaking my head. It wasn't the ending I'd envisioned, but it was a resolution nonetheless. With the Johnsons gone, the neighborhood began to feel like a true community again. People were more relaxed, more willing to connect. My workshop became a gathering place, and I even started teaching woodworking classes on weekends. The experience had been exhausting, but it taught me valuable lessons about resilience, community, and standing up for what matters. As I stood in my completed workshop one evening, the warm glow of the lights reflecting off the polished wood, I felt a sense of satisfaction. The battle had been hard fought, but it was worth it. This was more than a workshop. It was a testament to perseverance and the power of community. Little did I know, though, that the neighborhood's transformation was just beginning, and my workshop would soon play an even larger role in bringing people together. With Frank and Linda's departure, the neighborhood entered a new era of peace and cooperation. Their house was quickly sold to a young family with two energetic kids and a golden retriever, and the change was palpable. The oppressive atmosphere they had created dissolved almost overnight, and the community began to rebuild itself in ways I hadn't anticipated. My workshop played a central role in this transformation. What started as a personal project soon became a hub for the neighborhood. I hosted open houses to share my woodworking projects, and soon people started bringing their own ideas and requests. Tom, ever the social organizer, encouraged me to host weekend classes, teaching basic woodworking skills. It was a hit. Families came with their children, neighbors bonded over shared projects, and the workshop became a space of creativity and connection. One day, a woman named Susan, who lived a few houses down, approached me with an idea. "What if we use the workshop to build something for the neighborhood?" she suggested, like a community library or some benches for the park. The idea resonated with everyone, and soon we had a project underway. We decided on a small wooden library box where people could leave books for others to borrow. Over the course of several weekends, a group of us gathered in the workshop, cutting, sanding, and assembling the structure. Even the kids joined in, painting it with bright colors and whimsical designs. When it was finally installed at the park's entrance, it felt like a collective victory. The library box quickly filled with books, and neighbors began gathering there, chatting and exchanging recommendations. Meanwhile, my life settled into a rhythm I hadn't experienced in years. The workshop became not just a creative outlet, but a symbol of resilience and the power of standing up for what mattered. Occasionally, I'd catch a glimpse of the Johnsons' legacy, a flyer from their earlier campaign stuffed in the back of a drawer, or a neighbor mentioning their antics with an amused chuckle. But their influence had faded. The neighborhood had moved on, and so had I. One evening, as I was wrapping up in the workshop, Tom stopped by with some big news. "We're organizing a neighborhood fair," he announced. "Games, food, crafts, the works. And we were hoping you'd showcase some of your woodworking projects." I agreed, and the fair turned out to be a resounding success. My booth featured hand-carved signs, small furniture pieces, and even some collaborative projects from the weekend classes. People crowded around, asking questions and marveling at the craftsmanship. The fair raised funds for the local school and further solidified the sense of community that had taken root. Months later, I received an unexpected visitor. It was Linda. She stood on my porch, looking older and wearier than I remembered. "Can we talk?" she asked hesitantly. I nodded and invited her in. Linda explained that she and Frank had struggled to adapt to their new, gated community in Florida. "We thought it would be better," she admitted, "but it's so rigid there. Nothing like we imagined." She glanced around my home, her gaze lingering on the photos of the workshop and the community projects. "I've heard what you've done here. It's impressive." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to gloat, but another part felt a pang of compassion. "We've built something good here," I said finally. "It took time and effort, but it's worth it." She nodded and stood to leave. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for everything. We were wrong." Her voice cracked slightly, and before I could respond, she turned and walked away. That night, I sat in the workshop, thinking about her words. The conflict with Frank and Linda had been one of the most challenging experiences of my life. But it had also led to something beautiful. The neighborhood was stronger, the connections deeper, and my own sense of purpose clearer. As the months turned into years, the workshop remained at the heart of the community. New families moved in, bringing fresh energy and ideas. The neighborhood fair became an annual tradition, and the little library box was soon joined by a wooden bench and a community bulletin board. My workshop became a symbol of resilience, not just for me, but for everyone around me. Looking back, I realized that the struggle with Frank and Linda wasn't just about a building or property rights. It was about standing up for what I believed in and finding common ground with others. The experience taught me the value of perseverance, the importance of community, and the power of turning conflict into opportunity. As the sun set on another busy day in the workshop, I felt a deep sense of contentment. This was more than a house or a neighborhood. It was home. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow.